Amethyst, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet. So before we get into your work, I want to know first and foremost, we're in a new year. We survived a pandemic, and the
Mhm.
pandemic did so many different things to all of us. It was seismic in some of the things that happened. How much of living and surviving through that has affected the way that you do work now?
Honestly, for me, not a whole lot.
Okay.
Just because I was an entrepreneur for 15 years prior to the pandemic, so working from home was no big deal for me. If anything, it pushed my sales up because more people were at home, more people were looking for work from home opportunities. And then we ended up moving to my husband and I ended up moving to Florida for 2 years right before the pandemic hit. So we spent 2 years in Florida. He had a job there and he was downsized right at the end of that.
Wow.
And and it was like one long hot day. So for him it was way more miserable and way more stressful because he is an engineer and he's not used to working from home.
Yeah.
So I think for people who actually had day jobs and career paths, like corporate career paths, were way more affected than someone like me who's like, well, I'll just get online and do an interview or get online and do a tarot reading or coach
Yes.
someone. Like it really, and I feel bad saying that because I know it was such a huge thing for everyone. But I do have a PhD and two master's degrees, and
Yeah.
so for me, and I love history and everything, and I was just like, yeah, every 130 years or so there's a major epidemic, so not
Uh-huh.
surprised.
Yeah.
You can't say that publicly to people. They
Right.
get really upset.
Right. Well, I remember talking to some people that had old relatives that went through the Spanish flu and remember that and how you would hang flags on the house. And I was thinking the same thing.
Mhm.
Scientifically speaking, there's just a level of the planet that has to cleanse itself almost,
Yeah,
you know?
it really does. And I have a master's degree in public health. And I took some epidemiology courses, which is the study of the diseases. I worked with people at the CDC all before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was a vastly different perspective, I think, than with just my psychology degree or just watching as a business owner how things were kind of unraveling for a lot of people.
So let's get to the essence of what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of a third grade classroom. It's
Okay.
career day. And one of the kids in the back of the room is curious and is like, hey, what do you do for a living?
Right.
How do you answer him?
So I have an online business, and so I get online and I help talk to people about their problems and things that they are struggling with in their life. And I often use pretty cards that have pictures on them in order to do that because when you imagine you look at a painting, two people go into an art museum or something, and you look at a painting, one person's going to see some things in that painting, and another person's going to focus on other things in that painting. And by talking to people about what they see in that painting, you can actually learn a lot about them and a lot about how they think and what they have struggles with and what's hard for them in their lives. And by talking through all of that, it helps them really kind of bring it out in a way that they can see it, that normally it's really difficult to see what's going on.
What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream life?
Well, third grade, I wanted to be a writer.
Uh huh.
And then by the time I was 12 years old, I decided that psychology would be the way to help people because I came from a very abusive home and a very bad background. And so I wanted other people to not have to go through that or to at least be able to recover from that. And these days, well, years ago when I first started online, I started as a tarot reader. And so I actually found a deck of cards when I was 12, back when I was still a fundamentalist Christian. There was no difference for me. Every once in a while over the years, I would hear people say tarot is evil or these kinds of things, and I'm like, they're just pictures on a card. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
But there are still to this day people that push back around that, especially in business coaching and the business world. When I'm like, I use tarot cards. You can do what I do with any cards. I just use tarot specifically because they cover everything in your life.
Yeah.
I have yet in almost 20 years now that I've been professionally working with people with the cards because I started back when I was the psychologist, I actually started using them with my clients back then. I have yet to find someone who has a struggle or a challenge that isn't in some way represented in the cards.
Wow.
And so that's why I use specifically tarot cards. But the reality is, you could go to a museum and look at a painting and talk your way through. And it would bring up certain things. It just wouldn't cover the range of everything that maybe someone needs to talk about.
I would think one of the more nefarious things out there in any psychic realm would be the Ouija board. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah. I mean,
I
I
mean,
know,
I hear that a lot. I don't really mess with Ouija boards, and I don't know. I go back and forth on it. Like, is there something out there? Is there not? But I have had, experiences with Ouija boards when my neighbor, I was in, gosh, eighth grade, and she had a Ouija board, and it was really weird. It was like, go to the library, get this book, open to page whatever, and there was like a $50 bill in it. And I've always been like, all right, what did she plant it? Because she was poor. There's no way that I can fathom that she would plant the money there. Like, where would
right.
she have gotten $50? Whatever. So
Wow.
so I'm like, I'm just gonna leave that there. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I've always heard it's kind of a middle ground of spirits that should not be in this realm that are trying to get in, and it's just not good.
Yeah, I don't know. I also believe that there's some of it that is just from ourselves, right?
Right.
We all, if you studied quantum physics, which I've read a lot of books on quantum, super woo, but I'm also super practical,
Yeah.
right? So read books on quantum physics, and then I'm like, well, of course you are psychic,
Yeah.
as what people would think of, because all it is you're tuned into energy. Radio universe is what I call it, right? You're tuned
Yeah.
into the energy. And it's no different than when you walk into a room and your hairs stand on end on your neck because there's a weirdo or someone,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Or you're in a room and all of a sudden everyone turns towards the door because some charismatic person walked in, charismatic, right? And everybody feels their energy from all the way across the room. So
Yeah.
if you can accept that those two things are true and those two things have happened to everybody, then why can't we accept that sometimes we just know things that are, you're just picking up that energy. That's all
Yeah.
it is. Some people are more tuned in. Like if you're driving down the road somewhere and you have an old school radio dial, stick with me here, kids. I'm almost 50. But you have an old school radio dial, like you only get certain stations when you're
Hmm.
tuned in, and you only get, certain stations if you're driving through Nashville. You're not going to get the stations from Seattle,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that everyone comes in kind of built with their own inherent radio stations that they can pick up, and they can build on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but it really comes in handy when you're looking at coaching and helping people and building a business, because you just kind of get hits on, what do you think you should do, or what do you think you should not do, right? And
Yeah.
when you use the tarot cards in conjunction with that, it really helps you kind of project that and put it front and center. My husband and I have made decisions with tarot cards mostly recently on which company to get a new roof on our house,
Yeah.
but also which state to move to, which job he should take, which house to buy. I mean, we really use the cards for some very, very important decisions, as well as sometimes day-to-day stuff, like, if he wants to go out for steaks and I want to go out to a Mexican restaurant, we can tarot card battle, and high card wins,
Yeah.
or best card wins. So
Yeah. How did these abilities develop in you? Did you know early on? How did you get to this point where this is your life, this is your career?
well, very, yeah, very early, when I was very, very young, I always would know things, or I just would pick up on things. When
Yeah.
I was very young, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember there was quite a few times my mom was out driving around. We lived in Memphis, and I would be like, turn right here, turn left here. I had no sense of spatial direction, and I can't do that anymore to find a place. I think because my logical mind has gotten, too big, too in the way. But at the time, if she would follow my directions, we'd find where we were going. And, some people will say, well, of course, because you knew when you got into a car. I'm like, I was like 4.
Yeah.
I did not go, we turned right, so then we turned left.
Right.
you know, I would just kind of know things. I've had dreams of conversations that then happen, dreams of people I've met. When I was in third grade, I had this dream of a girl who was part Native American, which, Indian, right, at the time.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my friends. I was like, have you guys seen the Indian girl yet? Like, and about 2 weeks later, she came to the school and she was like, I dreamed about you too. Like, we had conversations with each other. So we recognized each other. We knew each other. We were best friends. And she was there for 3 months and then moved to wherever she went. I've never seen her again. But having each other there was very comforting for her, especially because she moved so much and she had so many problems in the school. And I was the person who would always stand up to bullies, and the older kids would try to pick on the younger kids. I got into an eighth grader's face one time and started screaming at him to leave someone alone, and I almost got detention. And um, but you just pick up on those things, and
Sure.
that's how it's always been for me. And my husband has had to kind of learn to trust this over the years. Um, I kept telling him, apparently, which I don't really remember, that something great was going to happen to him at the end of this year. He had been downsized into a bad position at work. It was last year. He had been downsized into a bad position from a bad manager. and and I just kept saying, just hang on to the end of the year. Something's gonna be fine. And
Yeah.
I said it a couple times, and he hung on to that so much to get through those final months at work. And he was offered a great position at the end of last year and is now in an incredible job with a huge promotion and a new title.
Wow.
Um, and he says, well, you just kept telling me that. I'm like, did I? Did I tell you that? He said, yeah, you said it like, he said all the time, but I think it was like twice.
Yeah. So, so do you have to work and evolve yourself? How do you keep up on tarot readings? Do you have to do any work? Do you have to put any specific work on the back end, or do you just live and tap into the abilities that you have and just let it work?
I do both.
Okay.
And I do believe that too much studying of the cards can actually impede your ability because you start getting into your logical mind.
Yeah.
That's why I teach something called 5 Minute Tarot, where you walk through what you see in the card and it gets you out of that logical place. So you're more into using the cards more like Carl Jung did. He had a whole Jungian archetype type of things, and a lot of those archetypes were based off of tarot cards. He actually used the major arcana in his what's called the Red Book, if anybody's interested. But you walk through the cards, and it's really your ability to let go of what you think you know and what you think you should be doing when you get the best answers and when you get the best things. So for someone like me, who I feel like schooling saved me, it saved my life because of my circumstances and my childhood and my mom and her people that she liked to bring over. Um, it really can be a tough place to kind of just let that go and trust. But at the same time, I was a very devout religious person when I was growing up. And so I have thousands of hours of prayer and stuff at my disposal. And now I just kind of shifted that to praying and what people call meditating in the spiritual community, because
Yeah.
they have religious trauma from praying
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah.
I have a whole series on religious trauma. It's really bad these days.
Sure.
But praying to whatever is out there that you feel comfortable with connecting with, because I do believe that there's something, and I do believe that that is innate in all of us, and it's more about tapping into that and finding finding that place where you understand that you're truly worthy and valuable as a person
Yeah.
and inherently good. And if you can tap into that versus what a lot of spiritual beliefs and cultural beliefs these days is that people are bad and that you have to beg for forgiveness every day, or my stepfather used to tell me, he would hit me and he'd say, "Well, I knew you did something wrong today." And I think that that's how a lot of people treat themselves,
Yeah.
is there's so much shame every single day of their lives.
Yeah.
And like you had to have done something wrong, today.
Yeah.
And the more you can use the tarot cards and really get into your rightness and your goodness, the better things get, the more open and naturally connected I feel like you already are.
So, in your life of dealing with a rough childhood, being highly educated, everything that you have evolved into, who has been that inspiration, that hero for you in your life?
Honestly, I really like Eleanor Roosevelt
Yeah.
and Abraham Lincoln are pretty much my heroes, and
Yeah.
Obama. I really liked Obama a lot. I think he
Yeah.
did a lot. I kind of like post-presidential Obama with his sarcasm and his swag these days.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of those kinds of people. I told you I'm a history person. I love history. I think history is some of the juiciest gossip. Like it's better than any reality TV show you'll
Uh-huh.
ever come
Uh-huh.
across.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really love them. I think that they stood in the face of great adversity with courage that I can't muster in myself. And so I find them very inspirational.
I remember being in DC and walking to there was some monument, and Eleanor Roosevelt's quotes and everything was
Yeah.
cascading on the way there, and I didn't realize how mighty she was. It just
Yeah.
wasn't something that I quite computed in my history courses, and I was just totally transfixed by what she did and the way she thought and who she was. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Her autobiographies are amazing.
Yeah.
Like
So
I'm gonna reread them this year because it's been a few years.
I need to pick one up. Yeah, that's a great idea. So let me ask you this. Of all of the people that you mentioned and just in general, if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find completely fascinating, spend some time with them, who would that be?
It'd have to be Obama,
Yeah.
honestly. I can't think of anybody else that I would rather hang out with. And I'm in a group with I've been to some networking groups and stuff, and I'm with a lot of people who are multimillionaires, hang out with Jack Canfield and those types of people. And I would still pick Obama.
So have you read Michelle Obama's book?
I've read part of it. It felt off to me. It
Okay.
felt really off, and I wasn't quite sure. And just the other day, I saw an ad from somebody who actually is a ghostwriter for the company that wrote her book. And I was
Oh.
like, no wonder the energy felt
Oh.
off to me because it wasn't her.
It wasn't authentic.
Well, I mean, it was authentic in the fact that people like that will talk to the ghostwriters and the
Yeah.
ghostwriters will write the words. So it is in a way, but it wasn't like, I think that it would have been much more powerful for me if she had put pen to paper or,
Yeah.
typed it herself. But I understand why she didn't totally.
Yeah.
Most people in those kinds of powerful positions don't.
Yeah.
But I tend to connect with the energy of the person. And so if I get a book from them, kind of like I love um oh my God, I forgot his name, Jean-Luc Picard,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
best Star Trek captain ever.
Uh-huh.
And I bought his book, Make It So, and it's same thing, just felt off to me. And I'm sure that he also had a
Yeah.
ghostwriter for that. And it just makes me so sad because I'm like, oh, I wanted to read you,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
get it. Yeah, you're totally right because I feel like that too when I read those that it's not genuinely them. But the one thing about her book that was really cool was the when Obama started courting her and they were meeting and all of the things that he was doing early on. And it's so weird to hear about him being this fresh young guy that
Yeah.
was pre-presidential and just how he evolved into this place and how he's been so good. When we look at how odd politics have become and how clowny things are. Like he
Mhm.
was just there for the right reasons, doing it for the right way, and he was so good at it, you know.
Yeah. He's a very classy guy, and I don't think there's a lot of classiness in the US right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I totally
There's
agree.
classism, but there's not
Not
classyism.
classy. I get it. I totally get it. So what is it for you? Because giving people readings, whether inadvertently or deliberately, you get in the middle of very heavy things that people are dealing with in their
Mhm.
lives. But you're a human being and you have to evolve and breathe. What is your motivation every day to do the best job that you can do, but to also evolve and be there for yourself every day?
Well, it's not about me is the one thing that I really put into my readings. When I was a psychologist, it was much more draining in a lot of ways. And then as I transferred more into reading the cards, it just became where there's a lot of readings where I don't even do a lot. It's mostly the other person talking through the cards and me asking the right questions and things like that. And these days, when people have those insights, when we have those really, really deep conversations, those are so normal to me. I suck at small talk. I cannot really stand when people are like, "What's the weather about today?" Like, look out the window, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I go deep really fast and I always have. By the time I was 12 years old, my best friends were in their 30s, and it's always been like that. I've always had much older friends, much more mature people around me. Even, some kids are more mature, of course.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's just the age, but
Yeah.
definitely the maturity of the person. And now when those, what you say, heavy things come up, but we have those insights and those breakthroughs, and it actually energizes me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes me very excited for that person because I'm like, okay, now you can begin the work. Because before people are just putting up these giant walls,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, are you ready to bring that down and leap over it, or where are we at?
Yeah, totally. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you ran into that much younger version of you in survival mode, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've accumulated over all these years, what advice would you impart on that young version of you?
I think don't think that that guy's whose name starts with S is going to be your husband when you're 18. 19. I didn't marry him, but like get over it sooner.
Yeah,
Um, but I have thought about this a lot over the years, and I think just telling myself that everything you're doing is going to lead to the outcome that you really want. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, just keep going.
yeah, yeah,
And that's really all any of us can do anyway.
yeah. So of everything that you've done and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Oops. I just hold on, I have a stack. I'm so proud. I do this on every meeting. Look, here's the ones I've written so far.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I also have a new one that's going to be about this size coming out. I have written it before. I'm just re-editing and updating it for 2025.
Sure.
So I have my stack of books. I have several more that I'm going to make. I have my tarot deck that I created myself with AI. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not an artist. It's the only
Right.
way I could do it.
Uh-huh.
And so but it did take me a lot of work. I'm not claiming that I drew it, but I am claiming that it's amazing and I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then I had created a tarot certification program, but I didn't like it was too difficult for people, so I'm redoing that. And then I'm going to be creating tarot therapy, which I
Okay.
already have a tarot therapy 101 course, but I pulled it because I want to redo it.
Yeah.
And I have several books on tarot therapy that I want to do because I think that we know now that talk therapy does not work for trauma,
Yeah.
and everybody has trauma at
Yeah.
this point, and yet talk therapy is still held up as this standard, as the golden child, back from Freud days, right?
Yeah.
People are still into, you should see a therapist 3 times a week for 6 years, and I'm like, it's just, when I learned that when I was in college, I was like, that sounds like a money grab to me. What is going on?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But that's how it's still taught. And I think that there are much more effective things for people with religious trauma and with other childhood trauma and abuse, like I went through, that are much better than just talking about it. Because what we know now, what I felt back in the day when I was a psychologist, because I was a psychologist for 13 years, and I was like, this is just not it. It
Yeah.
just does not work. What is
Sure.
going on? Everybody says it works, and all of my colleagues were talking about it. Maybe the next thing will make it be what sticks. because people, my clients would get, better at things for a while, but then they'd always revert.
Hmm.
And I was just like, this is weird. So I think that there are a lot more effective things for that. And what we know is that just talking about your problems over and over, they used to say it'll get it up and out of your system. What it actually does is it makes the neuron connections in your brain for that particular pain point more deeply ingrained and harder to get away from. It's kind of like when I was in undergrad, I was telling my teacher one day, I said, it seems like it's kind of like you're driving down a highway. And if you drive down the same highway or the same road every single day, the more people who drive down that road, the grooves get deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And you just need to get off at an exit.
Hmm.
Like you got to do something different. It doesn't make any sense to me that rehashing the same crap will
Hmm.
somehow make it better.
Yep.
It just doesn't. And so now we know from brain scans and things that it can actually make it worse.
Yeah.
And it definitely makes trauma and PTSD and what will be hopefully in the DSM-5 TR, if they make a TR version, CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And I'm glad for it. And I hope psychology catches up to tarot. It's
Yeah. Absolutely.
I know that's horrible to say, but
No, no,
I
it's
really do.
good. Yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I try to be, how can I cuss?
Yeah, you sure can.
I try to be a hard ass. I actually have my signs aren't on right now. But and one of them's on the floor. We're fixing to put it up. But I actually have signs for spiritual badass. I do have a trademark for that.
Yeah,
And it's really, I want to make a cult. I call it not to worship me,
sure.
but the basically I've already written, the 10 commandments of a spiritual badass. I'm actually releasing that book soon. And it's about learning about yourself, right? And so I think that for my perception, I feel like a badass, but everybody says like I'm a really hard ass in public and when I've done like online uh live streams and stuff in the past, I'm like, just stop and focus on what you need to focus on. And everybody's like, well, my anxiety or my ADHD. And I'm like, I also had problems. I would have been diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, OCD, and a slew of other stuff as a child had my parents cared to ever take me to anywhere.
Yeah,
Um, but there are ways that you can get out of it.
yeah,
And so a lot of people see me as not understanding that and not empathizing with that. Where my empathy lies is in practical solutions.
sure.
And so what I know from my work with people over 35 years, I guess. I mean, I'm almost 50, so yeah, is that you sitting around complaining about your problem or your diagnosis feels better in the short term, but it actually reinforces those symptoms and the negative things that are happening in your life. And it's not that I'm saying ignore that. I'm saying don't attach yourself to your diagnosis or
Yep.
to your problems. Acknowledge them and then figure out a way to move on.
Yeah.
For me, I think that is the kindest thing that you can do.
Hmm.
I think that people with their fake niceness that is expressed in especially women's groups online these days, where people's like, we should be in our feelings and we should be empathetic. And I'm like, how's that working out for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? So it's a balance. I feel like I'm a really great person.
Yeah.
I do love where I am now. I do love myself. I think everyone should love themselves. And I get a lot of you're stuck up. And you should be humble. I think humble should be eradicated from the dictionary. I
Yeah.
hate that word.
Sure.
So
Yeah. So if anyone wants to get the books, they want to get your tarot deck, they want to reach out, they want to hire you, any of the good business, where do they go?
amethystmahoney.com is my
Okay.
website. It's
One stop
got
shop.
all of my stuff there. We're rebuilding a lot of it. I'm taking a lot of time this year to really make it better. But even now with the blog post, I've started adding references and citations to studies and things like that. So if you're into the more psychology side of things, or if you're into the more like hardcore science with the, references of the studies and things like that, there are things like that as well. But there are also just, like, what's angel number 111 mean?
Yeah, right.
So it's a very eclectic mix. I I'm on a broad spectrum of interest and activities, and I can talk to people who are psychologists and very into studies. My husband's a security engineer,
Yeah,
so if anyone knows what an engineer is,
yeah, sure.
you know. And but then we also game,
Yeah,
and then read tarot cards.
that's
So
cool. Very
yeah.
cool. This has been refreshing. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.